Hi guys, my name is Christine and I'm a dating, relationship and personal development coach. And today I'm talking about why sometimes bad relationships can be good for you and why they can actually give you like a great awakening within yourself and can actually lead you to better and more healthier relationships, and why sometimes it's necessary to have a bad relationship in order to find that better relationship down the road. So first of all, before we get into this video, I just want to apologize again for the fact that the videos have been lower quality recently and they've been far and few in between. Just because just to give you an overview, just going through a lot of things, a lot of life changes, a lot of different things going on. Not bad things, all good things, just there's a lot of changes, a lot of changes. Maybe at some point I will say further down the road what those things are, but just not yet. But I will let you know if you are interested. A good way to find out is to actually follow my Instagram when these new announcements are being made. Another reason as well is that I've had an influx with clients coming in, a lot of things going on with that, so it's just been very, very busy and lots of new things happening to my life. All good things though, all good things. So bad relationships are actually really, really good for you, even though they kind of suck at the time, and they can actually, really put your heart through it as well, and they can be really, really difficult. But sometimes it's necessary to have bad relationships just so you can figure out what it is that you don't want. And if you know what you don't want, then you're more inclined to know what you do want, and then you can kind of make a list of the things that you do want in a relationship, and then you can look out for those things when you start dating again and you start meeting new people that you can date. So having a bad relationship is actually a good thing because it shows you what you don't want. And obviously the good thing about having good relationships is it shows you what you do want. And it may be the case you kind of have like one of those relationships where there's bad things but there's also good things, and you learn basically both things. You learn what you want and you learn what you don't want as well. And this is why, it's really good to go on lots and lots of different dates before you actually settle down with one person. Don't just settle for the first person that you find. Make sure that they tick a lot of the boxes and that you both want a lot of things, because what I see people doing is they go into relationships with completely the wrong person just because they're sick and tired of searching, basically, right? Because it can take a lot of time. It can be, things can rack up, basically. Like if you go on a lot of dates and you're spending a lot of money, these things pile up, basically. So what I would suggest, if you are someone like that who feels like, oh my god, I have to pay for another meal, I have to do this, I have to, if you're going through a lot of those kinds of situations where you feel like you're spending too much money and wasting your time on people, what I would recommend is you go to more cheaper places instead of more expensive places. Because one of the things that I see people go wrong with is they go out for a meal, go out to a restaurant on the first date, when it's better to actually just meet up for a coffee or a drink, something like that first. Because if you're just committing to meeting up for a coffee or a drink, then you could easily escape, basically, if you realize that this is someone that you don't really want to spend any more time with. And also what's great about just meeting up for a coffee and a drink, if you do hit it off, if you do actually start liking the person that you're having a drink with, then you can extend the date. You can go and have something to eat. You can go somewhere else to go and do an activity like bowling or something, or you go out for to a walk to the local park and have a chat that way, things like that. So that's why I would recommend, if you are someone who feels like they're spending a lot of money on dates because you're always going for a meal, or you might be going somewhere always really expensive on the first date. Don't do that if you feel like you're losing money, right? Go somewhere inexpensive and just have a drink. Have something that only costs a couple of pounds or dollars, depending on where you're from. Go somewhere that's inexpensive. And it may be the case that you need to research and find out where you can get like an inexpensive drink from, an inexpensive coffee, something like that. So you're not wasting that much money, especially if you don't have that much money as well, because not everyone can afford to buy 2 3-course meals on a date, on the first date, and then you kind of feel like you've wasted your money at the end of it. So it's good to go on lots of different dates, to meet lots of different kinds of people, so you can figure out what you do want and what you don't want and what you do want, right? It's important to do that, I think, because then you can figure out and you can kind of tweak that kind of like that perfect person for you. Now, of course, not when I say perfect, you're not going to meet someone who is, you know, the most like a perfect angel who's not going to have flaws, because everyone has flaws. Everyone has idiosyncrasies and things that aren't good about themselves. But you've got to realize and come into a realization of the things that you can tolerate and the things that you absolutely cannot tolerate, right? You might be able to tolerate someone with a bit of a bad temper here and there, but you might not be able to deal with someone who has a bad temper all of the time and just flies off the rails with every little inconvenience that happens to them, right? So you got to figure out basically what you want, what you can handle, and what you can't handle, and what you can perhaps handle a little bit, but perhaps not that keen on. So basically you want to have like a good list of things that you're looking for in a relationship, because like I said, most people settle down with the first person that they find, you know, and they don't take into consideration what they actually want, right? Because if you want someone who wants to have kids, who wants marriage, then you've got to make sure that you find someone who wants those same things. Because if they don't, then either you're going to be putting up with something that you don't want, or they're going to be putting up with something that they don't want, right? And you got to think of, you know, the lifestyles that you're living. Like, I think lifestyle is a huge one. One of the reasons why me and my wife get on so well is because we like doing the same kind of things. We have the same kind of lifestyle. We both love going out for long walks and just chatting. You know, we love doing that. I love going out into the countryside. I love going hiking, you know, going to those kinds of things. And she really loves that as well. And that's one of our favorite activities that we love doing together. Because if you have different lives and you don't like the same things and you don't have many things that you do together, then you're going to be really unhappy. So you've got to have the same kind of lifestyle, and you've got to have activities that you both love doing together. Because if you don't, and you just live separate lives, then eventually a separation will occur, or you'll stay together for the length of your lives, but it'll be a very unhappy relationship because you have nothing in common. And this is one of the big mistakes I see people doing when they get married to the wrong person, when they get into a long-term relationship with the wrong person, because, you know, they just didn't really take these things into consideration. They probably were really, really attracted to the person, thought they were super hot, but they had like these rose-colored glasses on, looked at the relationship like that, looked at them like that, looked at their date like that, and then got into the wrong relationship because they were looking at the wrong things. They were looking at the body, they were looking at the eyes, you know, they were looking at the lovely hair, whatever it was that did it, or they were looking at the six-pack abs, whatever it was, right? Instead of actually, or they could have even been looking at the fact that they've got a huge bank balance and thinking, yeah, that's for me, right? And then they get into something that they actually really hate and detest because they weren't looking at other things like what you both value. Do you value the same things? Do you live the same kind of lifestyle? Can you actually spend time together without actually, you know, wanting to rip your hair out, right? So a lot of people that I, you know, come into contact with that need help getting an ex back or want to get an ex back, you know, I ask them things like, well, what was the relationship like before you broke up? You know, was it happy? Were you having a great time? Did you enjoy it? Or were you relieved when the breakup happened? Was you actually happy? Was you actually thinking about breaking up with them as well? And usually they were. Usually it was all the negative things. They were there was a lot of arguments going on. They weren't happy. They were thinking about, you know, sleeping with someone else or breaking up with them. You know, they were thinking about those kinds of things as well. But it just happened to be that their ex happened to be the one that broke up with them first. And because when someone breaks up with you, you feel kind of like betrayed and upset because, you know, because as, you know, we're quite selfish human beings. We think that we're great most of the time. Most people are very overconfident and think that they're amazing. And they can't believe that someone would break up with them, right, basically. You know, obviously not everyone's like that, but we tend to get really even if it's someone we don't like, even if it's just simple as we're going on a date with someone, we're not really driving with them. And then that person says, you know what, I don't really want to carry on dating you. It still stings, right? Even though you felt the same way, right? So, you know, and that sting, especially if you've been in a relationship and you've just broken up, that sting can make you feel like, oh, I need to get them back, right? I need to prove them wrong, that they should have been with me. And now kind of like rejection has bred obsession. I think that's something that Tony Robbins says a lot, when it comes to like breakups and relationships and that, rejection breeds obsession. So even if you've been rejected by someone who you was planning on rejecting, the fact that they rejected you has made you become more obsessed with them, because that's just something that happens. It's just like a natural kind of chemical reaction that happens. So what you got to understand then is that sometimes a bad relationship can be actually very good for you, because it can teach you what you don't want. Now, another thing is that sometimes, even though you spent a lot of time in the relationship, let's say this is someone that you've been with for 10 years, right? It can feel like a waste of time. But the truth is that if you've even just learnt what you don't want, even if it's simple of just a simple lesson as, I realize that I don't want this kind of relationship. I don't like these parts of a relationship. I don't like these kind of personality traits in someone. That is still something that you've learned, and now you can carry that into a new relationship when you start dating new people, because at least you now know what you don't want. So it's never a waste of time if you learn something about yourself, even if it's something as simple as, this is what I don't want, or it could be that you learn about something that you do want, and then you kind of write that down. You keep reminding yourself of those things that you do want in a relationship, and also reminding yourself of the things that you don't want. So when you go out on a date and you're talking to someone and some of these red flags come up that you don't like, you know not to carry on dating that person. Or they might have some green flags that you really love about them, and you think, yeah, this could be the one. This could be someone who I could have a really good relationship with. So it's all about learning what the green flags are for you, what the red flags are for you. And when you go out dating, you now know what to look out for and what to avoid, instead of just settling down with the first person because they have a great pair of boobs, or they have a great abs, or they look really hot, whatever it may be, or the fact that they've got a lot of money or something like that. Or they have a few things that you really like about them, but there's other things that really put you on edge, because sometimes that can be the case as well. You might meet someone who has a lot of good things, but they also have a lot of bad things, and you hope that you can change them eventually over time, which is completely wrong. You can't change someone over time. Only they can change themselves, and most of the time people aren't willing to actually change themselves, which is a bit of a harsh reality, especially when you're someone who perhaps is willing to change themselves. In fact, you're probably more likely to be someone who is willing to change themselves if you're looking up educational videos like this one on how to, dating, relationships, things like that. So what you got to realize, though, is not many people are going to be like you. Most people aren't going to be willing to change themselves. So it's kind of maybe perhaps a little bit egotistical to think that you can actually change someone, because a lot of the time they're not going to change, and only they can change themselves. Nothing that you do or say is actually going to sway their decision of whether or not they're going to change. It's all down to them. And you have to assume, this is what I've always done, I've always assumed that people aren't going to change themselves. You have to assume that the person that you're on a date with is going to be like this forever. So if you see them acting out, if you see them being angry over the littlest thing, if you see them spending way too much money on ridiculous things, then you've got to assume that's the way they're always going to be. And if you see someone who you go on a date with who is amazing and they do lovely things, then you can assume that as well. You can assume, oh, this is just who this person is, right? So you can assume on both ends, basically. But you got to realize that you got to figure out what it is that you can tolerate, what you can't tolerate, so you can find that person for you who is going to be a great match for you. Okay? So that's basically my thoughts on why sometimes bad relationships can be good for you, because of the lessons that they can teach.